extend a very warm welcome from on the behalf of entire team of Mindler. And thanks again once more time so that you joined us today for very amazing panel discussion that we have. Well, I am Aishwarya and I will be your host for this session. But the best part of this session is that we have very extremely talented, amazing panelists with us today. And none other than we have Parikshit sir with us as well, who is going to moderate today's panel discussion. Before we go ahead and start off with today's panel discussion, I would like to repeat the topic. Today's topic of discussion is how our research-focused universities during the future of education and shaping emerging career pathways are. So to hear up from all the industry stalwarts, I would firstly like you all to get very much introduced, and I will be introducing our panelists today. So I will be starting off with Professor Dr. Upasana Mahanta. First of all, thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing your time with us today, and really excited to hear your thoughts on this topic. To introduce Professor Dr. Upasana Mahanta, she is a professor at Jindal Global Law School and Dean, Admissions and Outreach, OP Jindal University. Prior to joining Jindal Global University, she was working as an assistant professor in Center for Women's Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She has completed her PhD from Center for Canadian, US, and Latin American Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She was also a Shastri Doctoral Fellow in the Center for Women's and Gender Studies, University of British Columbia, Vancouver, and Canada. Dr. Mahanta's research interest includes role of women in emerging political institutions, gender understanding of conflict, women organizing and resisting in insurance context, and examining development through a gendered lens. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. Well, moving ahead, I will be introducing Professor Dr. Amit Jain. He is currently Pro-Vice Chancellor at Amity University, Rajasthan. Prior to this, Professor Amit was Director, International Collaborations and Professor at TAPMI School of Business at Manipal University, Jaipur. Professor Amit has been a visiting professor with University of Technology, Sydney, Australia, Senyan Istvan University, Hungary, and Salyanos University, Slovakia. Professor Amit holds a PhD from Sardar Patel University and has completed FDP from IIM Ahmedabad. He has designed and conducted training program sessions for executives of various organizations, including IDPI Bank, Bank of Baroda, JK Tyres, JK Lakshmi Cement, and many more companies that you would name off. He has several publications to his credit and has presented research papers at national and international conferences. His professional association include life membership of Indian Society for Training and Development, and is currently a National Council member. Dr. Amit is editorial board member of Indian Journal of Training and Development, and he is also chief editor of Amity Management Review. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Well, moving ahead, we have with us Shailendra Swaminathan, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. He is Dean Division of Social Sciences and Professor of Economics. Dr. Shailendra's broad research interests are in the formulation and application of credible research to science to examine questions of relevance to public policy. In recent work, he has worked on understanding the impact of health insurance expansions on utilizations and health in both the United States and India. He returned to India with family after spending about 2 decades in the United States, holding diverse academic and research positions at University of Michigan, the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and Brown University. Shailendra has PhD in economics from University of Southern California and is a faculty member in the Brown University Department of Health Policy and investigator at the Providence Veterans Administration. His work has been published in several journals, including the Journal of American Medical Association, Journal of Health Economics, Health Affairs, and the Economic Development and Cultural Change. One of the previous papers received the Academic Health Article of the Year Award in 2019. His work on the role of Affordable Care Act has been cited as evidence in the recent US Supreme Court case on the pros versus cons of expanding health insurance coverage. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And then we also have our extreme panelist, Shahim Rahiman, sir. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Atria University and is responsible for delivering a restructured learning experience that enables students to craft unique learning pathways and give them the scope and courage to explore their interest, pursue their passion, define their path, and forge their distinct journeys into the future. A firm believer of transforming dreams into reality, Sir leads the education revolution at Atria University and brings with him 20 plus years of experience in advisory, sales, and delivery across sectors. As an entrepreneur and global leader in the areas of enterprising transformation and technology, he has always been passionate about bringing and improving India's higher education system and left a flourishing career in consulting where he has helped thousands of campus hires in shaping up their career to drive change at the forefront. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And last but not the least, we have our extremely talented Parikshit sir, who is going to be the moderator, but I will be still introducing him. Professionally trained from Harvard University, Mr. Parikshit is one of the leading life coach, motivational speaker, and career coaches in the country. With over 20 plus years of experience, he has mentored and trained more than 2 million students across various domains and regions. Understanding students' aspiration, along with their aptitude and motivating them to achieve excellence, has kept him busy for more than 2 decades. Mr. Dhanda is an accredited MBTI and 5B practitioner and has blended the use of these instruments in training sessions for teachers, principals, corporate executives. His insights about people and situations and analysis of human nature make him one of the most sought after trainers.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you so much. That's so nice. Great. Let's move on with the discussion, right? And we have our esteemed, distinguished guests with us. First of all, I welcome you on behalf of Mindler and International Certified Career Coach Program. And of course, our participants are eagerly waiting to hear all of you. So I'm not going to take much time. First of all, Dr. Amit there, Professor Upasana, Mr. Shailendra, and Mr. Shaheen. Okay, I'll straight away get on to one-on-one with all of you. My dear participants, so what are we discussing today? One of the core areas of discussion today is definitely we've got our well-known universities and esteemed guests from those universities, but there is something very important here, that these modern age universities, how are they driving the higher education in India, and especially research, right? You would have heard all kinds of data as far as Indian universities, you know, and when we are talked about in the international forums, there is one thing that we are brilliant, we are great, but as far as research is concerned, we still have a long way to go, right? So therefore, today the topic is, what are the opportunities? How are they engineering or transforming the higher education with a research focus? So my first question to our guests, Upasana, let's start with you. And I would request each one of you, Shailendra, Amit, and Shaheen, for you to give our opening remarks, okay? Upasana, first thing, how are these modern universities, you know, how are they driving the future of education? I just want to leave it very, very open, you know, yeah, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Parikshit, and what an honor to be part of this really privileged, esteemed panel. And I would try and keep my remarks brief, and I'll try and keep you to the question you asked in terms of future of education, and then perhaps as and when the question is coming in, we will respond. So knowledge, education, learning, we increasingly realize that need to be reimagined in the context of a world that is increasingly complex, uncertain, precarious, right? That is a vision, particularly in the context of India, that also comes through in the new education policy 2020, which is also talking about multidisciplinary research-driven universities. Now, you know, two of the biggest crises that the world is seeing today, one, of course, is the health crisis, which you see in the context of a pandemic. Other is the environment crisis, right? Where we're talking about climate change and all of that. We have seen the transformative potential that we saw through digital technologies. We have also seen the deep-seated digital divide, where majority of, say, population in India do not have access to technology, which is also driving the entire conversation about future of education. So I think as my initial remarks, I would like to say that future of education is about thinking differently about learning, about the relationship between students, teachers, knowledge, and the world, to understand what is it that we are produce. I mean, the whole idea is movement towards a knowledge society, but what is there at the heart of it, in this movement towards a knowledge society? What kind of upskilling, reskilling is required in terms of the kind of education that we are providing to our students? So we need to think about ecological, intercultural, interdisciplinary learning that supports students to access and produce knowledge while also developing, their capacity to critique and apply it. I think that is at the heart of where the future of education lies, and that is at the heart of research-driven, research-intensive curricula and pedagogy that universities must go on towards embracing. Now, what kind of support mechanisms and other things that are required to actually make it possible, we can talk about it, but these are my initial comments.
Sure. That was very exhaustive, Upasana. Thank you so much. Samit, going to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aishwarya, for a very generous introduction, and thanks to you, Parikshit, for giving this opportunity. A very warm welcome to all the co-panelists. And as you asked about a question which talks about the future of education, in fact, I would like to start with a quote of Swami Vivekananda, who said that the greatest blessing to men or women is the light of knowledge coming from education. And the human mind, if enlightened, will experience no fear or superstition. So, a question needs to be raised here. And as you said, what is the future of education? So I believe most of the universities need to today blend the modernity with tradition. That is one part of it. Blend, local with a global approach. So a world of, globalization. And the future of education is to create professionals who can operate in a globalized and a digitalized world and face the VUCA and the BANI environment, as we say, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, which is now rephrased as brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible environment. So if the education is able to create, these kind of global citizens, probably that is what the future is. And, as a university, I believe, since I represent Amity, and the role of university becomes very important in creating that future. And no other institution better than Amity can understand, right, with due regards to all the colleagues here, that we are one of the largest education group with 12 universities in India and 17 overseas campuses. At a given point of time, we have close to 175,000 students. So we are very, very particular in terms of understanding the future trends, needs and expectations of the industry, and working to create programs and courses that address those needs. So that's it, I believe, as an initial.
Thank you so much. Shailendra, moving on to you, please. So if you could, share your opening remarks, please.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. Good evening and welcome to everybody. So in my understanding, I think the future of education, perhaps there's obsession right now that at least at higher education institutions, there's obsession with somehow, there's this notion that there's a placement, that is, there's somehow everyone, essentially is trained to get a job at the end of 4 years or 3 years. While obviously, I don't think anyone can sort of, that's important, but I think it's come to the point where it's become almost an obsession that somehow it's really all that matters is delivering some sort of a job for a student, regardless of that person's student's interest, right? I mean, so people come in with various interests, and somehow we are, I think, sort of somehow pigeonholing them into particular kinds of things to deliver a job. And I must say that if you look at the employment statistics, we're doing a pretty bad job of delivering jobs because there's quite a high unemployment rate, even amongst the college educated. So that's actually an important point to note, that it's not the uneducated who are unemployed. It is the ones with a college education that are unemployed, which sort of says that I think, we're obviously not doing a great job my sense is in the future of education, one should sort of combine this sort of need to, as was mentioned, train the students in somehow in this sort of constantly evolving world to be able to critically think about issues, to think about global challenges. But also, I think it's important for a student to be sort of educated in understanding that they're part of society, right? They have a societal contribution to make. It's really not this very much an individualistic kind of mindset that all that matters is me getting a job at the end of 4 years. And prediction. So initially, if you think about higher education, that's how it was. I mean, you really had the society at the forefront of what education was. The previous speaker mentioned Swami Vivekananda and enlightenment. If you think about Cambridge University, on their logo, it sort of roughly translates to in 1600, here we seek enlightenment and special knowledge. That was the goal of the university. It was never to actually deliver, so much of a pay package. So I think the future of education somehow should combine really some of these other things, really teaching them values, integrity, purpose of life, alongside the ability to sort of, be able to work and contribute to society. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you've given me and to the panel discussion a lot of food for thought, and I'm going to come back to you in my the next question. Shaheem, our other guest, he's having some technical issue. Shaheem, are you there with us? Or do we come back to you later, Shaheem? He's having some internet issues, so we'll have to see. Okay, Shaheem, I think we'll come back in few moments. Shailendra, I'm coming back to the point that you raised. Okay, let's start with you, the next question. Now, let's look at our students. It's not about state curriculum or other Indian curriculum. When the students are getting trained, rote learning is the biggest challenge for us. Okay, now they come to university selection. University selection is purely either grades, or entrance exams, or maybe now that you or all of you are driving a change vis-a-vis a holistic evaluation system. Now these students come to the college, and many of them don't even know about curriculum, what they are going to study, the process, what is innovation, critical evaluation, critical skills, critical reasoning, and importance of research. How important are these things, along with what's the purpose of education? Now, from there, how do we promote entrepreneurship? That they are not only job seekers, they're job creators as well. So my question to you, picking up from where you left, is how do we deal with these challenges when students are coming to us in an unprocessed way?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a difficult question. I mean, obviously, we've thought about this quite a bit. That they come in sort of, without, this sort of real excitement about innovation at the university, I think is lost on most students. In fact, I remember a talk I went to with Raghuram Rajan, the former governor of RBI at a university in southern India, where, in fact, a graduating class asked him, where do you think the jobs are? And his response was, you shouldn't worry about that. You should be able to create your own jobs. You don't look for someone to employ you, be in a position to be able to create jobs and innovate. So I think, in terms of what a university can do, the first thing a university can do is to sort of, I guess, in a way, open up the boundaries of the child to what are the global challenges, right? So, I mean, before even deciding what I want to innovate on, I want to be given an idea. So what are the big challenges the world faces today, right? And I can do that in two ways. One is I obviously get very esteemed speakers talking about human rights, which is a huge issue, about poverty, about, obviously terrorism is a huge issue, war is an issue. So you have people who have not just read about those topics, who've been actually in the forefront, telling the students about what the real challenges are, the world faces are, that on the one hand. The second, which I think is also important, is, oftentimes students in India, I'm not sure if they appreciate much the kind of challenges many people in poverty face in India, not just in urban India, in rural India as well. So essentially, again, I mean, these small, what they call field trips to rural India, I mean, in fact, I personally have gained a lot from that and trying to understand what are the challenges So spending few months outside the classroom in the field, in the villages, I think is a massively educative experience, which must be promoted. And then I think, again, I mean, it really depends on where one is situated. See, for example, in Chennai, where we are, trying to strike collaborations with something called the IIT Madras Research Park, which is actually about 15 kilometers from where we are, very open to sort of, talking to others about, potential ideas for innovation. They bring in great faculty and sort of, so what you do is essentially you get students interacting with people who are thinking about these issues on a daily basis. Okay. And so again, I'm not sure how much time I have, but that was sort of how, at least, again, I'm thinking initially one could sort of begin this process.
Great. Thank you. I mean, that at least we'll continue with this discussion. Upasana, now, picking up from where Shailendra left, okay, maybe my next question, I don't want to mix the questions. I have too many questions on my mind. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead with your view on the same thing.
Yes, thank you. No, I think Shailendra, if I hope it's okay if I call you that, has covered most of the points that I wanted to make. Couple of things I want to say. I think one is he's absolutely right. I mean, see, if education is a powerful force for social change, and somehow, we have lost that understanding of education. Now, education has become a space for creating people for jobs. And I think, there needs to be concerted effort to reimagine education and go back to the basics. But the second important aspect that I want to talk about, that we are not even doing a very good job of preparing students or our learners for possible jobs, once they leave institutions of higher education. And in fact, Shailendra was talking about, unemployment rate and all of that. And even in that unemployment rate, you would be, probably some of you are aware, but the fact that, as the number of women in institutions of higher education has been constantly increasing. There are a lot of women who have now even gone into STEM fields, but the number of female labor force participation has constantly been reducing, as low as, I believe, around 24%, and the global average is some 40%. So, clearly there is a need to think about education in much more inclusive ways than we are currently thinking about. That is one. Second, Parikshit, to respond to your very pointed question about students coming in from a very different kind of education at the school level, rote learning, and then how do we instill values of research and so on and so forth. Multiple levels, I think we'll have to work. What do we have to do with the students? Shailendra addressed quite a few of them, but I think it's also important to work with the faculty. To have faculty development workshops, to constantly reimagine pedagogies, to be able to think in innovative ways about how we interact within the context, both inside and outside the classroom. We have to start thinking about even workshopping our curriculums, because our curriculums have been in many universities going on for decades of the same text and syllabus that we have been teaching again and again. So how do we innovate in terms of the curriculum design, and then in terms of delivery of that curriculum design? And in that comes in the point that Shailendra raised about, internships, immersion programs, going to, sort of rural India, urban India, wherever the context is appropriate, where they have more real life, knowledge. And also, I think the industry academia interface is very, very important, because at the end of the day, no matter how much we say, the mindset of wanting to get a job post higher education is not going to go away. So I think more industry academia interface is required. According to the new Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, 50% of our current employees will have to be reskilled by 2025 because they do not possess the requisite skills to be able to respond to the demands of the job market. So I think to be able to tell the students to think about why, the why is not only to get a job, the why is to be able to have the requisite skills that you can do that job well. And that can happen only when, you bring in industry experts and advisors. You have the kind of interface that Shailendra was talking about. You workshop your curriculums. You have constant conversations. So only then I think this kind of a holistic change will be possible. Sorry, I took a lot of time, but I'll stop there.
No. Really, much needed thought. When you talked about industry, academia, faculty trainings, and of course the reskilling is another scary picture that we'll have to look at. Mr. Amit, back to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Parikshit. And I would like to add to Shailendra and Upasana, and I have a slightly different perspective because I see things from the top as the leader of the university currently. And my focus is always on getting right people and creating right processes. So system or an ecosystem has to be created where this skilling could be, done. Because as your question said, that how do we instill or how do we equip students with problem-solving mindset, creativity, innovation, and so on. So, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, the revised one, the new one, it talks about the outcome-based education, and the outcome should be in form of the student should be able to remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Now, this creation is not possible without research, right? If a student has to create something, it can't be done without proper skills and abilities to research something, right? So what we at Amity, what we do is we involve students in research at all levels, be it undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD, postdoc, whatever it is. First, one way to do it is very, very live projects, working directly with the industry. The entire curriculum is reviewed by industry advisory board on a regular basis. And one question which is always very prominent in all our industry advisory board is, give us the problems that you face on a daily basis and let our students work on these problems. Let our students take up these problems as their projects, as their dissertations, and they work on it. So we have linked the industry problems, made it part of the student curriculum for which they get credits, for which they get evaluated, right? Almost every program has internships and summer trainings where we always advise students to pick up a life problem, a real life problem, and work on it. Then we have Amity Innovation Incubator, where we support students with the research that they have done. We have created an IPR cell. We help them to first protect their IPs, right? To get the patents done, to create and develop the prototypes. And then the incubator system takes their ideas towards commercialization, converting them into startups, right? And, no doubt, because of this system, Amity was ranked as one of the top Indian academic institutions for patents and commercialization. Now, that commercialization is very important. Research is done by many universities. A lot of research publications come up, a lot of patents and IPRs come up. But how many of these publications get translated or converted into actual live businesses or are commercialized? So we were ranked by DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, last year in August 21 itself, as one of the top universities promoting the IPs as well as the commercialization. So that's my perspective on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Shaheem, team, could you just check? I just got a text from Shaheem. He's facing technical difficulty. Just cross-check with him. All right. Now, Shailendra, the next question is, now usually when we talk about research, again, a very conventional mindset or a traditional mindset is research. Suddenly, the moment you talk about research, students think about research being STEM careers. Non-STEM careers are suddenly not research oriented. I don't know where this idea comes from anyway. So my question is, when we talk about domains, research domains, and especially, areas are in STEM careers, but the moment you move to non-STEM and especially liberal education also, how do we create research opportunities for our students? I know all your distinguished universities, whether it's SAI or Amity or Atria or OP Jindal, I know all of you are driving the change, but can you just share few notes on this, please?
Sure. And can you give me a sense how much time I have in this response?
Maybe a couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes sounds good. Okay, great. That sounds good. So I think, one of the challenges that I think India faces, I'm going to talk about non-STEM research, is that to do research in non-STEM areas, you need often data of stellar quality. You need incredibly high quality data, right? Regardless of the tools you use, the quality of the data has to be great. And India actually suffers along with the fact that the quality of the data that's available is actually, compared to what can be sort of desired and should be desired, is actually not very strong. So one of the ways in which I think research can improve in India is really for universities to think about building data infrastructure that essentially to collect and sort of store data for non-STEM research. It requires obviously time and money, and I think one of the ways in which universities can do that is if they can actually come together in some sort of a consortium to be able to sort of agree that, okay, if these are the broad set of questions that I think, a broad community of students and faculty are interested in, what's the kind of data that we need? And to be able to actually come together in that way and sort of say, okay, can we actually pool together a pot of money to be able to sort of not be overly reliant on government data, which, as I'm not sure everybody does. The National Sample Survey Organization has been collecting data for the last 60 years in India. I've been told the quality of the data has gone down. And in fact, people who worked on that data can say that. And so basically the suggestion being made here is, why can't universities actually come together? In fact, they should, because really what this involves is a substantial initial investment of money. And I think, this notion that somehow my success depends on someone else not succeeding, I think is perhaps taken quite very seriously by some. But that's actually nothing can be further from the truth. I think it has to be a collective effort on the part of universities coming together, talking at sort of, a high level, but then sort of seeing how they can work together to build this sort of data sets. And all I can say is we as individuals and as individual universities go and collect in the data sets. But I think to be able to be actually deliver on the promise of high quality research, I think universities must come together to build high quality data systems that everybody can actually use and this country can benefit from.
Thank you. Actually, Shailendra has touched a raw chord. Upasana, I was talking to the student who's wanting to do her PhD, and her area was women entrepreneurs in emerging economies. And what she did, she went about, did a lot of research, and ultimately her prof told her, I'm sorry, you're knocking at the wrong door, because she just couldn't get data of women entrepreneurs in emerging economies. So now she's changed the entire course of her research only because of lack of enough data in our country, right? So he's touched a raw nerve there. Upasana, over to you now to respond to the question, please.
Wow, yeah, that's a tough one, but I will try. I just want to pick up from what Parikshit you just said. The student who couldn't do the research on women entrepreneurs in emerging economics because of lack of that data. And that tells me two things. One, which is Shailendra is very rightly pointing out, the lack of data itself, the fact that there is a lack of evidence building and so on and so forth. The other thing, if I were supervising that student, and with no disrespect to the supervisor, I would have actually asked her to write her thesis on why there is lack of data on women entrepreneurs in emerging economies. Because one of the biggest thing, and feminist research methods talks about it a lot, is to be able to read the silences. I think one of the methods of research itself is about reading the silences in data collection and data building. And the silences itself tell you a lot. And that could itself become a part of your methodology. That is one. Second, again, tying up with what Shailendra was telling earlier, I think at the heart of research lies a curiosity to know, right? And what are you curious to know? You're curious to know something about which enough existing knowledge is not available. right? And you try and bridge that gap in the existing knowledge through your research. So along with the need, which I completely agree with, to build data, to build evidence, I think there is a need to also universities very seriously talking about research methods, right? And I think humanities and social sciences increasingly, like for instance, I teach a PhD course called Empirical Legal Research, where I draw on my experience, because I'm a political scientist by training, but I draw on my humanities and social sciences training. So, from questionnaires to case studies to ethnography to anthropology, so much have contributed to legal research, to research in STEM fields. We're increasingly realizing the importance of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary study. We're increasingly realizing that none of these ideas, concepts exist in isolation. Right. So I think, therefore, it is very, very important for universities to start seriously thinking about, I studied in some of the key public universities in India, but unfortunately, research methods was something that was never emphasized on. And I think that students, to be equipped with the right tools and methods to be able to do the research, and then that will help in building the data and the evidence that we need to build. That is one. Two, I know the NEP talks about MERU, the multidisciplinary education and research universities to be built. I don't know how that will happen, but one of the ways, for instance, what we do, we have interdisciplinary research centers. So that helps in building research tools and investigating things across disciplines. So I would stop there, and perhaps we can talk more.
Thank you. And I love that that phrase that you used, read the silences. So I'm going to keep that. Okay. Thank you so much. So no copyright violation. Okay. I'm going to violate that. All right. Thank you so much. Before I go to Ms. Amit, I have, Shailendra and Upasana, I would request, there are about 5 questions in the Q&A. If you feel like answering any one of them, please go ahead. And I would also request Shailendra, Mr. Amit, as well as Upasana, please share your email IDs in case the participants want to get in touch with you. They can write to you. Mr. Amit, you talked about patents. And you talked about intellectual property rights. Absolutely. Long way. I mean, India is going a long way, and of course, there's a lot of work that's happening. So, how do we associate that with non-STEM and liberal education? Please go ahead.
So, we are a multidisciplinary universities with almost 300 programs across 60 disciplines. So, research at Amity is not confined to STEM, not at all. And I'll give some examples for that. 2,700 case studies have been developed by the faculty of Amity during last few years. Now, can you develop a case study without research? No, not at all, right? That's one way of demonstrating your research potential. One very recent example is last year, some of our faculties developed specific case studies on MSMEs, and they were published in a reputed SAGE case journal. In fact, SAGE rewarded with $500 USD to every faculty because there is dearth of Indian cases to teach, especially in business or if you talk about management. Secondly, we have set up a center, Yunus Social Business Center, with Professor Muhammad Yunus, Nobel laureate, right? And the focus of this center is again to take research to society and help students create social businesses. But unless until they go out to the market, they find out the needs and expectations, and especially when we are talking about social businesses, we have to, as talked about bridging the digital divide, we have to look at India as well as the Bharat. Okay, so that is one more way of connecting our research with society, and primarily this kind of research is not done in labs with the chemicals. Right, although we are fairly strong in STEM also, biotechnology and patents and all that, but our non-STEM departments are doing equally good. We have a center of positivism and happiness, and we want to research, how to deal with mental health issues, how to deal. We have a psychological research center. We are very strong in clinical psychology programs. Right, and many of them work on those dimensions. So there is a lot in research when we move beyond STEM, and it is not only about methodology that we are talking about. There are several ways, quantitative and qualitative ways coming in now, and there are different new methods coming for research in non-STEM. So that's my perspective.
Thank you so much for throwing light there. Shailendra and Upasana, I would also like you to share. Shailendra, we'll start with you. Can you tell us how are you, at times, innovation and creativity can be an acquired taste. But what I want to know is, how are you doing this in your universities? How are you helping students adapt to this new culture of research, innovation, and creativity? Shailendra, we'll start with you. Can you talk with special impetus on your university, please?
Sure. So you mentioned research, innovation, and
creativity. Anything. I mean, how are we helping students develop these?
Yeah. So I just want to sort of, so with our university and I think with a few others as well, the first thing is that, as I think you mentioned this, Parikshit, that, they come in with a lot of biases. The students have been actually, the peer pressure. I think there are a couple of questions on the chat group about the peer pressure. So it's basically they come into college already, their minds, oftentimes very cluttered about really what they really should be pursuing. So what universities are trying to do is sort of saying that you allow the child or student in the first year to be able to take a broad spattering of courses. Okay, you don't need to actually say, okay, I want to major in biology or physics or chemistry or computer science on day one. So you give them a year, you give them a broad range of courses, you allow them to be exposed to some really bright minds, not only just sort of academics, but also people in industry. Have them come and talk to them about some of the work. And really, I think what we are doing is we're able to introduce students to, people who are actually their age or slightly older, who are doing exactly those things, who are innovating. So I can give you the example of, a couple of lectures we had on blockchain in a computer science class, where we had a professor from Stanford University talking to our students, but he brought his students to that classroom. It was a virtual classroom, right? And there's nothing more powerful for an 18 or 20-year-old than to listening to a 22-year-old talking about some of those big ideas, right? How are they doing this in Silicon Valley? And I think, to be able to sort of spur the imagination in that way, I think, it sort of suggests to us that's perhaps one way to go. The other thing that we're trying to do is to actually build on the fact that, again, this is not, as I said, I like the collective wisdom of everybody, every university. So this is what I'm going to, even since you asked about Sai University, I've got to respond to that. But, so on our governing board, we have people like Mr. Narayan Murthy at Infosys, sort of trying to actually get him sort of tell us about, essentially, what are the kinds of things that sort of, industry really needs? Okay. And one thing that, he's told us is it's really this sort of very broad education, for the child is absolutely important. They find that a lot of, students who come in actually lack that. And finally, what we're trying to do is, apart for these thought leaders, put them in touch with, essentially with, we talked about internships, right? So essentially very early on, in fact, even in the first semester, we had students actually talking to people who would potentially get them internships over the summer, this coming summer, on topics that you would never heard of about the integration of computer science and music. Okay, see, that's the kind of thing that I think, we've got to sort of try and understand that we've dropped the ball a little bit, because we're sort of saying you can either do computer science, or you can do music, or you can do history. But the point is that I think most of the best work that's being done is being done at the intersection of disciplines. So we're getting them to actually talk to people who've done this. But yeah, I'm going to stop there. Again, I'm sure the other panelists will have a lot to say as well.
Yeah, thank you. Today only in one of our case studies, I was talking to our participants, and I shared about someone picking up psychology and dance and music, and looking at, amalgamation, and looking at therapy, art therapy, music therapy, and this girl's doing very well at one of your universities, right? Upasana, your university is also doing a lot of transformative work. Please share that.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is, I mean, the first step is what was also mentioned by Shailendra, that when they come in at the very first year, first semester, the idea is to be able to give them some foundational courses, whether you're doing liberal arts or political science or history or public policy or international affairs, but to give you a sense of the foundations of that course and to help you open up your mind towards the possibilities that exist in those various courses. In that, of course, again, the academia and industry interface help. For example, say in our General School of International Affairs, we have faculty members who were serving ambassadors. So Ambassador Mohan Kumar, who was India's ambassador to France, is a faculty teaching the students in say the program in global affairs. So that sort of helps in building that interface between industry and academia. Many of, so say the executive dean of General School of Journalism and Communication, Kishalai Bhattacharya, has been working with NDTV most of his life as a Ramnath Goenka awardee and all of that. So that can be brought into the context of the classroom. So that bridge immediately happens. The second thing is that research, I think, does not happen ki one day you wake up and is like, no, I'm going to do research now. It has to be a building block process. And one of the way of building that, which we truly believe in our university, is sort of nudging you slowly and helping you go towards it. So in the first semester, perhaps you've done one assignment where you've done a book review. So for the first time, you've read a book cover to cover and not thought of the book as something that you have to note down things of, but you have to critically reflect on, that you have to engage with the key argument that the book made or an article made, or you have to think about, ways in which some of the arguments are supported. Is there enough evidence that supports the argument that the book or the article makes? Do you agree with all of them? How do you critique with that? So on and so forth. So you sort of build that, how to engage with the text. I think before the skill of researching and writing, how to read a text itself is also a skill. So how do you critically engage with a text? How do you read a text? How do you critically reflect on what a text gives you? So that is the focus. And then you sort of, by second, third year, you give them assignments where, for example, they would go to, say, a labor colony nearby, or they will interview people in and around the villages. Fortunately, we are located where we're surrounded by community and villages, and so we encourage them to go out and again think about how to collect evidence, to write a short piece based on the data that you've collected. Again, teaching them about ethics of research, that it's you just can't go up to anyone and say give me data, the idea of consent, the idea of ethics of research. So you slowly build that up, and then some would want to many of our faculty write with our students, so we publish with our students. So when they work with us, then it gives them a sense of how to go about it. And apart from all the other things that Shailendra said, I don't want to repeat it, but workshops, having research seminars, workshops, talking to them. We have student-run blogs, which are run exclusively by students. So they write short pieces there, and that can be later developed. So many of our students have actually published extensively during their tenure. Then we have an entrepreneurship program. We have incubation center where there are ideas they can work with. We have a legal aid clinic. We have exclusive community engagement programs through which students work. So the idea is to gradually introduce them to the world of research, make them feel excited about it, and then do it to produce that, we are producing it, but to be able to do it in a much more, holistic, nuanced manner. I'll stop. I just take so much of time. Sorry.
No, it's not that. Upasana, let me share. Excuse me. If anyone, all the participants, and of course, when they'll look at the recording, it's like this is like a proper. This is as good as a proper detailed note on research. That thanks to three of you. Thank you so much. Moving on to the last question. So Amit, we're starting with you again. The question is, now you talked about that there are 300 plus programs, for example, right? Hundreds of programs that, and I know Sai University and OP Jindal, just a few days back, I was talking to Pasna that we have introduced many more courses. Now, my question is, in the good old days, it was very simple. You had a commerce student, science student, art student picking up, and life was so simple. 15, 20 courses. You're a commerce student, economics, BCom, chartered accountancy, whatever. Now, with these hundreds of courses in these universities, my God, there are so many times you can't even understand what is being taught. So that means at your university also, and each one of you, I'm asking, there needs to be a full-fledged career guidance and a mentoring system as to what is being taught and how to kind of, find your path. Over to you, Mr.
Yeah, thank you. So as I understand, there are two parts to it. One, we were talking about innovation and really good to know about great innovations done by other institutions also. Excellence is always a journey and there are several milestones. So we all are moving towards that. So I would like to talk about the innovative things first, and then probably I'll move on to the second part, which talks about mentoring, right? How to wade through this sea of confusion, right? So in terms of innovation, in fact, we take very proud that we are a research and innovation driven university, and how research translates into innovation. I'll give some examples of that. So innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship go hand in hand. It's not possible to see these three things very differently. So in fact, every year we celebrate our innovation week, which culminates on the innovation day, which also happens to be the birthday of our Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Aseem Chauhan. He's very passionate about these three things: innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And that passion, brings in our blood the passion for creativity and innovation. So what we do during this week, students will work on their projects. They will showcase their innovation, creativity in form of models, prototypes, projects. And then, we have, as I talked about, innovation incubator, where some of these ideas, the best ones, can be picked up to be further incubated in form of a business. So happy to share 300 startups we have incubated so far. 30 have moved out of our incubation center, running as successful business. One of that business also got featured in Shark Tank recently. Everyone knows about it. And there are more than 1,200 patents filed, more than 150 granted. So that way, innovation is part of the system, and we are very particular about it. Talking about mentoring, this innovation, unless until there is proper guidance from the mentors, this innovation will not come, and unless until there is flexibility in the academic system.
Sure.
So, new education policy is now talking about what Dr. Upasana also said, multidisciplinary education. Amity, for last 15 years, we have a system of minor track, where every student, irrespective of their course or program, can take up additional specialization, additional minor certificate. Every semester, they will do one additional course as an open elective. They combine the basket and make it a specialization. End of the program, they get an additional certificate. So an engineering student can get us additional qualification in management, and architecture can get in management, a management one can get into hospitality. So that interdisciplinarity is already there, that flexibility is already there as part of our system. And for that, mentoring is very important. So for every 7, 8, 10 students, there will be a faculty mentor. We have a healthy faculty student ratio, for that matter, in our universities, because we do have a lot of government funded projects also. So it is possible to have additional faculty, and the faculty is not only doing teaching, they are involved in research, they are involved in consultancy, they are taking up industry projects, they are taking social projects. So that way, that mentoring happens. When these faculties work on these projects with the society, they take students along with them. Very recently, we did some projects for government of Rajasthan, and students were part of that team, where they have actually gone to government schools and evaluated their technology adoption.
Great. Good. Very valuable initiatives. Thank you. Shailendra and Upasana, we are at the last leg of the discussion, and therefore very critical inputs from you, that here students are not able to decide their subjects, what to take after 10th class. Right? I mean, we are dealing with that also. And now we are asking them to pick up majors, minors. Of course, definitely there is a lot of deliberation required. I mean, how do you get them to choose? How do you, so what kind of a support system do we have at your universities? Shailendra, I would really need your critical inputs, and then moving on to Upasana. Upasana, you'll have the last word there.
Great. Thank you. So just about a minute, I'll try and summarize. So one of the things that's important to note is in some universities, certainly ours, students, are encouraged to ask, what are the big issues or questions you are interested in knowing more about, understanding, being a part of the solution, right? So you start with a question and then try and figure out what are the kinds of subjects, courses, whatever you need to take to be able to answer that question, right? So it's not that so I think, trying to so the question is completely the students, right? So they obviously the first year, they already have this range of questions. There's they out in the villages in urban India, try and figure out what are the big issues they're interested in working on. And then obviously there's a group of faculty members that are going to say, so to be able to understand and get a good grip on this question, you need to be able to, get some sense of psychology, perhaps, you certainly need some economics, perhaps a little bit of computer science. And you build from there. So you build your curriculum from the kind of questions that you're actually interested in being a solution towards. So that's, I think, that's certainly how we're approaching it. Clearly, we have faculty advising them on the kinds of subjects that will help them answer the questions.
Thank you, Shailendra. Upasana.
Parikshit, if I understand you correctly, you are also asking as to how do students decide what subjects to choose post their school, as to which direction to go to, because there is availability of such, array of possibilities. Is that what you're asking?
Oh, so yeah. So maybe an add-on, Upasana. What I'm saying is, as a student, I may find even picking up my stream after 10th, that could be a tricky question. Now, when I come to your university, now I have to, find my way through hundreds of programs. So that means that would also require some sort of support from the university.
Absolutely.
Kind of mentoring, consulting, or counseling, or career guidance, how to pick up the right tracks. That's the question.
Okay, all right. No, I got it. Two quick responses to that. One, I think, educators, both at the higher education institutions or, school counselors, principals, educators, at the school level, should also tell the students, increasingly guide them, mentor them, and counsel them that it is all right. Because sometimes it can get a very unnerving process. I think it is too much of an expectation that a 15, 16, 17-year-old is making a decision that's supposed to define the course of their life, And what I want to say that it does not necessarily have to that. And I think we all as educators will have to come together and talk to all stakeholders, educators, parents, students, that it does not necessarily have to be like that. The idea of interdisciplinary education is not merely that, that you do, which you do cross, at Generalist, for example, we do cross-registered electives. So you can be a student in the banking and finance school and take a elective at the School of International Affairs. That is one way of looking at interdisciplinarity. But the idea of interdisciplinarity is also that each subject is to be taught in an interdisciplinary way. So, for example, if you're studying political science today, how do you study political science without having an understanding of the economy, or without having an understanding of how the society operates, or with, so each subject in itself are truly interdisciplinary in nature. So first thing to tell students, which we try to tell, and I think we all as educators and stakeholders tell students at all levels, that it is all right. There is no right or wrong choice. And it is always possible to, for example, you can do commerce and then go on to do law, or manage, you can do a bachelor's in political science and then do a master's in international relations or sociology, or so it is not that it has to be a very linear way of progress in terms of career. The traditional way of looking at careers have shifted. So I think, yes, there is a plethora of courses and possibilities available, which can be confusing. Sometimes overload of information also confuses you, and it is also getting out of your comfort zone. There is a comfort to doing traditional disciplines that we have been, looking around and seeing. But I think the idea is, and there is this brilliant book I would recommend everybody to read. I think it came out in 2018, 2019, Epstein's book. It says, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And it sort of spoke about, that this whole view that only specialists will succeed. It dismantles that idea by looking at from Nobel laureates to business persons, to sports persons and everything, to say that it is all right to be dabbling with things and not to be absolutely sure of the discipline that you want to do a liberal arts education or do a degree which is a political science or a journalism, and wanting to move to something else. The beauty of multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity is that it takes you out of that kind of a disciplinary bind. And I think that is what we try and tell our students, and quickly, and therefore we do not have a placement office. We have an office of career services. So the idea is to give them holistic understanding of career path. So the idea is not that your education will lead to a placement, but we can guide you in the process of your career quest. I will end there.
Thank you. Thanks to each one of you and dear participants. I mean, though it was Upasana who had to have a last word, but as a moderator, I can use my discretion. Let me share something with you. I interact with thousands and thousands of parents each year. And the question is, Parikshit, private universities versus government setups, all right? And there is a lot of discussion. We would want to send them to XYZ government universities, and private universities are good and blah, blah, blah. But let me share with you my experience of last 20 plus years. And especially during the last 10, 15 years, there is a lot of amazing work that's being done by these very well-known universities, and flexibility, adaptive, faculty, the kind of investment that it takes to bring in higher education, it's very expensive. However, these universities, you can count on your fingers, right? There could be 20, 30, 40, 50. There is a long way that a country has to go vis-a-vis imparting education, and that also reasonable, of course, with their intake. Few universities can take, as Mr. Amit talked about, that they have an intake of lakhs, vis-a-vis so many universities, but there are universities where the intake can be 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 also. So there is remarkable work that's happening. My only request to each one of you educators is that as counselors, as career coaches, as practitioners, as professionals, we need to know what are these universities doing. They are doing a lot of path-breaking work, and therefore that's where I rest my case. Thank you so much, Upasana, Shailendra, Amit. You have really, really made our evening, and one of them gave you, all of them, of course, gave resounding feedback, but there was one gentleman who wrote, imagine they have been here with us since 9 in the morning, right? And 9 a.m. since 9, they've been here. And you can imagine, and they wrote, and the gentleman wrote, I am not even moving from my seat. That's thank you to all of you. You have made this panel discussion a classic. Thank you so much. And in Saudi, they start at 6:15. So you can imagine from different countries, they're there. Thank you so much, Upasana, Shailendra, Mr. Amit. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thanks so much, Parikshit. I just want to quickly mention there's some sort of request for email. I don't know, should we send you our emails? Is that
No. Please feel free. free. Please feel free to put your email here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Please. We'll be glad that they can interact with you and get to know you and your university. Absolutely. Please feel free. Just put down your email here. And if you've not put it down, you share it with us. We'll immediately put it in their groups. Yeah. Aishwarya, just wait. Shailendra is just sharing his email ID. All of you stay safe, take care, and let the education continue, the learning continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to all co-panelists.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Panelists. Thank you so much. It was really nice to have you here. And thank you so much, Parikshit sir, as well, for moderating this panel discussion. Before all the participants leave, a short information for all of you that tomorrow the session starts at 8:45 a.m. So please make sure that you are there at sharp 8:40 a.m. Thank you so much once again.
Okay, Aishwarya, now our guests are gone. I will also take your leave and see you tomorrow. All the best.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Have a good evening. Good evening to everyone again. Enjoy.